Good morning, Andover. I think we can do a better job of thanking Dr. Siegfried for that organ prelude. Thank you, Dr. Siegfried. I am so glad to see you all here, as I am on every Wednesday that we gather for All School Meeting, but particularly so because today is our non-sibi day, All School Meeting. It is also a day that we declare every once in a while, and not even every year, which is the day on which we decide to award the Claude Fuess Award, the highest honor of the Academy, which we will do before this session is over. I have a very few brief remarks, and then I will turn it over to the stars of the show. First of all, we're not doing announcements in order to preserve time for our speaker, but I was asked to make note of Celebration, which is happening this week. Mr. Kaktu is organizing it with wonderful students. I urge you to take a peek at everything that's happening and participate in that festival over the course of this week in particular. And second, I just wanted to note how this particular all-school meeting fits into the trajectory of our year together. As you know, we focus often on our founding values, and no founding value is more core to us than the non-sibi value found in our seal right here. This morning is a way for us to hear from one of our most distinguished members of the alumni body, who is going to talk about her life in this context and the importance of non-sibi to her. It extends, of course, the work that we all did together on Friday and Saturday, a truly joyful and wonderful expression of our community values. And it seems to me actually this might be a good time to have a quick community thank you to Monique Cueto-Potts and Emily Hughes and Julia Howard, who organized Non-Sibi Day. Thank you all for that extraordinary work. And in this celebration, we are joined this morning by some distinguished members of our alumni who we have celebrated in other respects, and I want to introduce some of them to you. This morning we are joined by Oscar Tang, who is the longtime chairman of the Board of Trustees, a name well known to all of us. We are welcoming also Agnes Shu Tang, his wife, who has joined us this morning as well. And we welcome back Chaz Fagan, another member of our alumni body. Please welcome back these distinguished alumni to Andover. And finally, what I would ask you to do as you settle in and think about this morning's session is to think deeply about what it means to lead a life in non-sibi and how your life here at Andover can prepare you for what comes afterwards. I think often in my own life that the hardest question to answer is how to be a good person, leading a good life in a good society. And I think each of those parts is crucial, and each of those are things that we can affect. This morning I spent a few hours with the Science 465 crew, which is a group looking at how to do experimental research and how to do so in an ethical way, how to do that in a good way. I suspect many of you spent the morning in various settings, maybe it was in Mr. Bardo's English class or otherwise, asking similar questions. I hope that every day is non-sibi day in the sense that we ask these hard questions of ourselves and prepare ourselves for a life in non-sibi to lead a good life as a good person in a good society. To help us to determine that, this morning we welcome back Ai-jen Poo, one of the people we're proudest of in our alumni body. And to introduce her is Arzu Singh, class of 2016. Arzu, welcome up.
Ai-jen Poo, class of 92, sat in the very seats you sit in today. She looked at the same seal and heard the same non-sibi motto. Perhaps she too sat in the chapel and listened to a non-sibi day speaker. Somewhere along the lines, though, the words non-sibi became more than just a phrase on a seal to Miss Poo. They became words by which she lives her life. After graduating from college, Ms. Poo got involved in advocating for the rights of domestic and private household workers, a segment of our workforce that is often overlooked. You see, domestic workers like housekeepers, nannies, and caregivers for the elderly and disabled are excluded from most labor laws, including collective bargaining, sick pay, protection from discrimination, and occupational safety and health protection. In 2000, Ms. Poo founded Domestic Workers United, an organization of Caribbean, Latina, and African domestic workers that organizes for, quote, power, respect, and fair labor standards. It was this organization and the work of Ms. Poo that spearheaded the successful legislative campaign for a Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights in New York in 2010. This legislation, which entitles workers to overtime pay, 1 day of rest per week, protection from discrimination, and 3 days paid leave per year, is the model for legislation being considered in many other states. She was also instrumental in the Department of Labor's decision to include caregivers for the elderly and disabled in federal minimum wage and overtime protections. Currently, Ms. Poo leads the Caring Across Generations campaign, which aims to increase access to quality, dignified, affordable care choice for the elderly and create 1 million more caregiving jobs with adequate training and living wages. Indicative of Ai-jen Poo's incredible work are the many accolades she's received. To name a few, in 2012, she was listed in Time's 100 Most Influential People and in Newsweek's 150 Women Who Shake the World. In 2014, Ai-jen Poo was named one of 21 individuals to receive a MacArthur Fellowship, commonly known as the MacArthur Genius Grant. But what speaks far louder than any of these awards are the voices of millions of workers who have been able to tell their stories, mobilize and organize, and change their lives because of Ms. Poo. So I believe that Ai-jen Poo and her work are just to hear non-sibi not simply as words on our seal, but as an invitation to truly engage with the people and the world around us. Ms. Poo has thought about the issues and people most of us don't, and has fought for the issues and people most of us won't. And that perhaps is the crux of what it means to be non-sibi. Please join me in welcoming Ai-jen Poo.
Thank you. Can we have another round of applause for Arzu, please? Thank you so much. Good morning and happy Non-Sibi Day. Yes. It's wonderful to be with you today on this very favorite day of mine on the Phillips Academy campus. I want to especially thank Head of School John Palfrey for your leadership and your vision. And it's also wonderful to be on campus and see so many old friends and new. And I have a couple of friends who are back on campus who were there when I was there and when my sister was here. Amy Morris, who is my dear friend, class of '92, and Josh Mann, who officiated my sister's wedding. So I definitely feel here at home and with friends and family, especially on a day like today. And it is also incredibly special for me to be here at a moment when one of my dear mentors and friends, Mr. Seth Bardo, is actually closing out his time here at Phillips Academy after many, many years. I want to say to you, Mr. Bardo, thank you for your faith, for your wisdom, for your mentorship. You carried the lantern that helped so many of us see. Your light lives inside of so many of us, thousands of us, and we carry it with us every day. Thank you so much. Round of applause for Mr. Seth Bardo. One of my favorite speeches of all time was given by the author George Saunders at the 2013 Syracuse University commencement. In speaking to the young graduates, Saunders helped them anticipate their futures. He said, "The things we regret most in life are not the things you might expect, but rather failures of kindness. Those moments when another human being was there in front of us, suffering, and we responded sensibly, reservedly, mildly. Or to look at it from the other end of the telescope, who in your life do you remember the most fondly, with the most undeniable feelings of warmth? those who are kindest to you. Now, Saunders goes on to admit that kindness is in fact not easy, but he believes it becomes more natural with age. He quotes the poet Hayden Carruth, who wrote near the end of his life that he was mostly love now. Saunders wished for the graduates to embrace this awareness early, avoiding failures of kindness, and instead strive to be ever more kind and connected to others, and ultimately mostly love. Now, I come from an immigrant family and had the great gift of growing up with my grandparents. I don't know how many of you grew up with your grandparents very much involved in your life, but I can't imagine what I would be like without them. And I don't know if they grew to become mostly this way, but they were certainly mostly loved by the time I entered this world. They showered me and my sister with kindness. They cared for us, laughed with us, offered important perspective on life. From my grandmother, I learned how to appreciate and cultivate laughter. She's one of those people who believes that if you laugh from the bottom of your belly 3 times a day, you'll stay healthy your whole life. She taught me how to use the potty, which turned out to be pretty useful. She also taught me how to cook, which we both agree we have not nailed, but we are actively working on it still. From my grandfather, I learned hard work and discipline. He was a lifelong Tai Chi practitioner, and when he was in retirement, became a teacher. And I grew up watching him practice every morning in the driveway from my bedroom window. The slow and steady, deliberate motions of the Tai Chi practice. That was how I learned hard work, discipline. And it was also with him that I developed a deep appreciation for the hidden strategies of the TV show Wheel of Fortune. Do you know this show? There's lots of interesting strategies. 2 extraordinary people on different sides of my family, but very similar life experiences. Early life defined by poverty and war in China, migration, hard work, raising families, each an incredibly full life of hardship and triumph. And then their stories diverge later in life. After my grandfather turned 90, he lost his vision and some of his other functions, and my father had to place him in a nursing home against his wishes. I visited him there, and the memory of that visit haunts me to this day. My grandfather's bed was in a dark room with about 6 other people. It was, for some reason, the light wasn't working, and the light in the hallway was flickering. Half of the people in the room were completely still and unmoving. The other half were in extreme invisible pain and suffering. My grandfather clearly hadn't eaten or slept for days, and he was afraid. He was alive enough to tell me he was afraid, but I knew that he was dying inside. And after only 3 months in that facility, he passed away. On the other hand, my maternal grandmother just turned 90. She lives in her own apartment not far from Los Angeles in the San Gabriel Valley, across the street from a Chinese grocery, not far from a Chinese hair salon where they know how to perm her hair just right. She goes to church twice a week and even sings in the church senior choir. She and I play mahjong together, and once a year she lets me win, usually on my birthday. She's living life on her own terms, or in Dr. Atul Gawande's words, she is still the author of her own story. And it brings me tremendous peace to know that she's living well now after having cared for so many of us. So 2 grandparents, both loved by their family dearly. What made the difference? A woman named Mrs. Sun. Mrs. Sun is the home care worker who comes and looks after my grandmother every afternoon. She assists with the things that have become more difficult over time, things like lifting, cleaning, shopping, getting to appointments. Our last big scare was when my grandmother slipped and fell as she was rushing to get to church on time, and now Mrs. Sun or her husband always make sure that my grandmother gets to church on time. Mrs. Sun is also an immigrant from China and has become a key part of my family's care team. Her own family of 2 grown sons and husband have also become like extended family to us. My uncles and my mom do a lot for my grandmother, but none of us can imagine what our lives would be like without Mrs. Sun. They all have families, some live far away. We count on Mrs. Sun to be there. It's the work that makes everything else possible. What could be more important than caring for the people who cared for us? And it's among the most undervalued work in our economy today. We often compare care work to the Wild West because you never quite know what you're going to get. You could find a wonderful family with whom you build a lifelong, very healthy and respectful relationship. Oftentimes these relationships last for generations. Or there's the whole other end of the spectrum, and I've seen human trafficking cases, modern day slavery cases, and then there's everything in between. An entire spectrum. There's really no standards, no guidelines, no playbook, nothing mediating the relationship. And it's the kind of job that isn't really considered a real job. It's often called help or companionship. And then there's that long history of exclusion that Arzu mentioned, where this workforce is excluded from some of the most basic protections that you and I take for granted when we think about work in the future. And the wages are so low. Average of $9 an hour. So low that this workforce, mostly immigrant women and women of color we count on to take care of our families, can't take care of their own. On top of this, many of the workers in the workforce are undocumented immigrants trapped in the shadows, vulnerable to deportation and separation from their own families without a pathway to legal status. Women like Mirla Baldonado, who is a Filipina caregiver in Chicago, who helps elders in the community live well and independently. She's had over 20 clients, working 24-hour shifts, 4 days a week, lifting her clients in and out of bed, helping with physical therapy, cooking. She's also introduced the Filipino cuisine to dozens of older Chicagoans, and it's become quite popular. She's known for this. She loves what she does, but for this work, she takes home between $7 and $9 per hour and supports 5 children. With that, plus the cost of the room that she rents, there's barely any money left over. Her grocery list includes no frills, often just eggs and bananas. A recent study from a think tank called PHI revealed that the median annual income for home care workers is $15,000 per year. It's hard to imagine a town or city in this country where you could survive, let alone raise a family on $15,000 per year. We can do better than that in America. We must do better in America. Unfortunately, our movement, the caregiver and domestic worker movement, has been working for many years to ensure that we do better, and we are making progress. About 25 years ago, domestic workers started coming together in church basements like the one just below us and community centers around the country. And for most of the last 25 years, that work has been very slow and small, community by community, meeting by meeting. But it built over time, and by 2010, we were able, after a 7-year campaign in New York State, to have our first big breakthrough when New York became the first state to pass the Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights. And now 5 additional states, including Massachusetts, have passed legislation, and the Massachusetts bill is actually one of the strongest in the country, so we can be proud of that. And last year, after many, many years of advocacy, combined with leadership from our great Secretary of Labor, Tom Perez, the Department of Labor made a rule change that brought 1.8 million home care workers under minimum wage and overtime protections for the first time in over 80 years, after over 80 years of exclusion. So we are making progress, and that progress is incredibly timely, because we are at an unprecedented moment of demographic change in this country, such that we need more care than ever before. Every 8 seconds, someone turns 70 in America. By the end of this year, 4 million people will turn 70. The baby boom generation is aging, plus advances in healthcare and medicine have allowed for us to live much, much longer than ever imagined, which is a great thing. It's extended our life expectancy by nearly 20 years since what it was in 1930. The combined effect is referred to by any number of ominous names, like the silver tsunami or the gray revolution. I prefer the term elder boom because of the opportunity that it holds for positive change. But whatever you call it, what this means is by the year 2050, more than 27 million of us will need care or assistance just to meet our basic daily needs, our parents, our grandparents. And then on the other end of the generational spectrum, millennials are starting to turn 35 and starting to have children. And in previous generations, in the absence of a real good caregiving system, we relied upon women staying home. The default assumption was that women would stay home as family caregivers. Now that's simply not our reality. Most working age adults, women included, are in the workforce working as much as possible to make ends meet. So we're going to need a whole new approach to caregiving, including a very strong caregiving workforce for the 21st century. There's much, much to do. But what I really want to share is that I've learned so much from working with a caregiving workforce. It's actually reinforced so much of what I learned here at Andover, especially the spirit of non-sibi. Domestic workers and caregivers embody in their work the spirit of not for self. They go to work every day and support the dignity and well-being of others. That's their job. And any one of them will tell you that while it's hard work, the reward is so much greater than any wage they could ever be paid. There's something uniquely human about caring and doing for others. It may be, in fact, what makes us human. We've been taught this really powerful myth our whole lives about human independence, that we just got to get it together, go it alone, pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. But the truth is that from the time we're born, we're a part of an incredible web of human interdependence, and it is what makes us human. And it can also be a powerful force for change. I've watched over and over again in my work how a group of people who care about the same things and care about each other come together with a plan and a vision and make history. It happens. It's been at the heart and soul of every major social movement that has brought progress to this country, that caring and connection among people. It's that caring and connection that makes the difference between a group of people and a powerful force for change and progress. And there's so much at stake for us now, in this very moment in this country. It is this generation of young people who will be defining the future of so many things: our safety net, the future of work and jobs, the future of the planet. It will be up to you and us to create the kind of creative solutions that families and communities will need to live well in the 21st century and beyond. beyond what anybody has done up to date. We need more, and we need a kind of new energy and creativity that only you can bring. And we start today. Without a doubt, there will be enormous challenges ahead. The demographic changes in this country are profound. By the year 2040, we will be a majority people of color nation, and over 20% of the population will be over the age of 65. The older population will be significantly whiter, and the younger population will be significantly more of color, particularly immigrant. The state of Arizona, as it turns out, is the canary in the mine. Arizona is the state with the most young people, with the most older people, white people over the age of 65, and the most young people of color under the age of 18. So it is the most racially and generationally polarized state in the nation. So the most white people over the age of 65 and the most young people of color under the age of 18. I believe that it's no accident that Arizona is also the birthplace of the notorious legislation SB 1070, the anti-immigrant state law that set off a chain of similar laws around the South and the Southwest, creating a chilling effect on immigrant communities. This demographic polarization could be the breeding ground for policies that turn us on one another. We could run the risk of becoming the kind of country where our interests are constantly polarized and pitted against one another along lines of race and generation. And we're already seeing some of that in this presidential election cycle. Or we could choose a different path. We could present a vision for the future of this country where everyone is part of the solution, and we take care of each other. Another caregiver whose story I wrote about in my book is named Erlinda. Erlinda told me about a client who she called my lady. My lady, she says, always asked me to sing to her. Erlinda grew up singing in church and has a beautiful voice that her lady very much appreciated. But one particular day, rather than ask her to sing, Erlinda asked softly for her hand. She said, "Give me your hand." And Erlinda knew right away that her beloved lady was going to pass on. So she immediately called the family together, and they quickly gathered. Together, they surrounded her in a circle of care as she passed on. They became a circle made mostly of love. Erlinda was proud that she could bring everyone together in a circle made mostly of love. May Non-Sibi Day every year be the day we focus on caring for others, honoring those who care for us, and growing the movements that will allow us to realize the true potential in each of us and in this country. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ai-jen Poo, and thank you for this great standing ovation to honor our guest and our graduate from the class of 1992. We have some important business to conduct, but before that, if there are a couple of questions, Ai-jen would be happy to entertain them. So there are mics on either side.
The dog's name is Bowser, in case you were wondering. It's my sister, who is also an Andover grad, and my grandmother and my mother. And if we were to take that photograph today, there would be a fourth person, a little person named Agnes, who just turned 1, my sister's daughter and my niece. So there are now 4 generations of us. And she will be coming to Andover. My sister is already talking about how to secure her spot here. Oh, yes.
Hi, my name's Ashley. I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming. My question is sort of about what we can do to help. So I just turned 18, and so now I feel like I have a civil obligation to help those who I can help through the government and through sort of being a civilian. And I was wondering, like, what specifically we can do, because you've been talking a lot about government policies. How can we help make those happen?
It's a great question, and I'm so glad you want to get involved, and I'd love to be a resource to you, so we should stay in touch. I would say it's incredibly important to be a part of the civic process, so to vote, to encourage your friends and your communities to vote, to get involved in voter mobilization efforts, and also to join organizations that are working on issues you care about, because that's where the actual civic participation connects to making progress on policy. And we can talk a lot more about that, but I definitely think that the first step is joining, being a part of something, and then being in motion in your community, encouraging others, and being a leader, which it sounds like you already are. So I'm excited to hear about you and for all that's to come.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tucker. I'm part of the class of 2017, but so about 2 years ago, one of my mom's closest friends quit her day job and became a hospice care worker. And I was wondering if you could describe ways, and it's so hard on hospice care workers, and the work that they do I think is so amazing. How can I, as not a care worker, support friends and family most effectively that are in this kind of work?
That is such a great question. I'm so glad you asked it and that you're tuned into this. Because so many people don't think about the caregivers until they either become one or they're in crisis. And I think that that's a very difficult time to plan. But I think one of the things that is most supportive of caregivers is to actually have a plan where they feel like they're not alone. So the most important thing is caring for caregivers, whether they're family caregivers, hospice workers, or professional caregivers. And we support them by letting them know that we recognize and value what they do, and as families and communities, that we want to plan together for how we're going to take care of each other. There's also a whole suite of policy reforms that I think are going to be really helpful. We have to really encourage our elected leaders to invest in programs like hospice, right? And in the ability of families to afford the care they need, and in the workforce. The workforce needs training, support, respite, so much more. So I'm so glad you're thinking about these things. We need a plan, and we need to take care of the caregivers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tucker. Thank you, Ashley. Ai-jen, I think you can see already that your wonderful remarks have sparked great thought among our students, and I hope many of you will flood after the all-school meeting, the mural room, where we'll have a chance from 11:45 to 1 p.m. to spend more time talking about these same topics with Ai-jen Poo. So I would ask you if you would mind being quiet for a moment while we carry out a very solemn duty here at Phillips Academy. It is an occasional thing that we decide to award the Claude Fuess Award, our highest distinction, to a member of our alumni body, and we do so today to Ai-jen Poo, class of 1992. Claude Fuess was the head of school from 1933 to 1948, and he made it his commitment to ensure that our alumni embodied non-sibi through distinguished contributions to public service. The award was established in 1967 in his honor, and the award has been presented only 26 times during that period of time. Recipients are alumni who embody non-sibi through distinguished contributions to public service, including a broad range of things, and I would urge you in your hearts and in your minds to think about these broad series of ways that you might serve other people. Terms in elected and appointed public office, careers in journalism, education, medicine, and the arts, commitments to humanitarianism, social entrepreneurship, cross-cultural understanding, philanthropy, and volunteerism. Last weekend, as we were all engaged in acts of non-sibi, where we completed more than 50 non-sibi projects, alumni and parents around the world joined us in that act in the same spirit of non-sibi. In fact, there were more than 26 projects located in 12 states and on 3 continents carried out by our alumni at the same time. In the spirit of non-sibi, in the spirit of these projects, and in honor of Ai-jen Poo, we award you the Claude Morphis Award. Please join me in congratulating and thanking Ai-jen Poo. No, wait 1 sec. Mr. Bardo, would you come up for one moment? I would like to have also some photographs with Mr. Bardo on the stage. I will say that he has been a constant supporter of the non-sibi ideal. He has also been a constant supporter of Ai-jen Poo and her career, and I'm very grateful to Mr. Bardo for his advocacy for all of the work that Ai-jen has also done, and I feel like the partnership between faculty and students that this represents is really the very best of Andover. Mr. Bardo, thank you. Thank you. All right, Andover, you have been charged with a life of non-sibi. I can imagine no more exciting example than what Ai-jen Poo has given you. Go out and live it, go out and do it. All school meeting is dismissed.